In this video, I will be showing clips of a video that I made a couple days ago, so I can give you all the information that is required of me. This all really kind of started, believe it or not, started a few years ago, even before we got here. If you've been with me for a long time, remember me building this truck camper. It actually started before that, but this is probably the best example. Our pop-up camper was burned down in the national forest in Florida. Well, that was kind of, if it's going to happen, it was kind of good that it happened in Florida. Northern Florida, to be specific. That's important to this video. My dad lives down there. And then we go over to Dad's house and we started building this thing. The original build, we put Luan down. That was the original build. Now, granted, this thing's in bad shape. Let me get to that point in just a minute. And we started traveling, and that lasted a year. And I'm thinking that's pretty good. We've traveled all over the country at 55, 60 miles an hour. North Dakota, I guess South Dakota actually. Missouri, I can't even tell you where we went. And then we started heading back down that next winter, back down to Florida. And we noticed that the paint that we'd used had started peeling. So instead of spending tons of money and trying to rebuild the whole thing, figure it all out, we got Coroplast. Now, I knew Coroplast wasn't gonna last forever, but you gotta think this thing has lasted 6 years. And this year it started breaking apart. You can see the Coroplast. So we covered in Coroplast, and that was actually pretty cheap. Now, the whole idea behind this was we needed a lightweight camper. Our truck is a 4-cylinder. We couldn't put much weight in the back of the truck because we had to have water and all our stuff and food. So this thing weighed 250 pounds. Dad and I picked it up and put it in the back of the truck. And then when we put the Coroplast on it, I bet we didn't add 9 pounds to it. I don't think it weighed 9 pounds. The problem is there was not much encouragement on YouTube comment section about this camper. A lot of people really thought this thing was going to fail. I remember we got it on the truck and I decided to drive it down the road from Dad's house, turn around and come back. We got it up to 60 miles an hour and it held on. That was the important thing. I felt a lot better, but I was scared it was going to fly off. But once we started staying in it and things were looking like it was going to work out, the comments didn't stop, of course. Comments were, well, first time you fly into a bird, you're going to fall apart. Well, in the Grand Canyon, North Rim, we were driving away from North Rim. Now, I can't remember if we were leaving North Rim or if we were going to get food, but it doesn't matter. I hit a bird. And that was a 50, 55 mile an hour impact. Jumped out. The Coroplast wasn't even scratched. There was a little bit of a blood stain. That was it. So we traveled around and decided we were going to give it up. And we decided to buy this piece of property. The thing that I wanted to brag about in my videos was the well. Now at the time it was just a big hole, well, a 6-inch hole in the ground, went down 100 feet. And my plan was to do exactly what I've done. I was going to put a well pump down in there, pump water into an IBC tank. Well, there was this lady who went everywhere on social media. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere anybody would listen, and was saying that wasn't going to work, that the pump was going to burn out. And I tried to explain to her that, you know, I was on a submarine and it wasn't going to burn out. Well, her husband drills wells for a living. So apparently that makes him an expert on well pumps. It doesn't. It makes him an expert in digging wells. Well pumps have electric and pump. I went to lots of training to learn how to rebuild pumps. Those kind of pumps on submarines. But she went around saying this just wasn't going to work. But I've never heard from her since. Now that I've been here, well, this pump has been down in there. It's going on 3 years, I think. Don't quote me, but I think it's 3 years. Definitely 2. 2.5, 3 years. And I run it all the time. Now, her theory is that well pumps are designed to kick on, shut off quickly. Of course, I'd be running mine for several minutes at a time, up to an hour, filling an IBC tank. The opposite is exactly true. The longer you run them, the better. Kicking them on and off like that really wears them out. Well, then the nightmare really started. I built the tiny house. First thing I did wrong was I admitted that I didn't know how to build anything. I didn't know how to build anything. And I also said that I was going to take some shortcuts. This was being built during the pandemic. So the one thing I didn't want to do is have to follow all the codes, because this $5,000 house would have went up in price to about $50,000 to follow all the codes. First of all, I would have had to build it bigger, even double the size. This is under 200 square foot, which means I didn't have to follow code. But after I started building it, the code enforcement came out here for an unrelated issue and said, oh, you're remodeling a trailer, because it was on a trailer frame. And then from that moment on, everything I did was wrong. I mean, everything. There wasn't a thing that I did that was, hey, that's neat. Wow, great job. It's that you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. You're not following code. That was the big one. Well, then I got it built and people were convinced it was going to fall down. Again, I think we're coming up on 3 years on this. I don't know, maybe 4 years. But then I put in the wood stove. One of the things when you put in a wood stove is it appears the pipe is in upside down. You would think that you were supposed to twist this the other way. Otherwise, smoke's going to come out of here. But that's not how science works. The reason you want the top pipe inside the bottom pipe is if creosote gets in your chimney, you don't want creosote draining outside of the pipe. You want it to drain down into the next pipe. Now, if you take a match or a cigarette or anything after this is lit and heat it up, it's actually going to suck the smoke in or the match in. It sucks air in. That's how science works. The heat draws the heat up. So the heat is going up the tube, that heat rises, and while it's going up, it's sucking air into these vents. Couldn't convince people. Absolutely had to be wrong, because in regular ventilation, when you do it in like a gas heat, you do it the opposite way. Every YouTube video out there shows you how to do it. The instructions tell you this is how you do it. Of course, everybody said that I bought the wrong kind of wood stove. You can't use that kind of wood stove. These new wood stoves are junk. They didn't understand that you have to have dry firewood. This one woman just ripped me one side or the other. I'd never own another one of those. I come home and the wood's out and it won't burn, and it's because she was using wet firewood. The wood has to be 20% or less. Now, of course, the YouTube comment section, everybody's been doing everything for 30 years. It's incredible. As you can see, I don't have a flapper vent here. According to federal regulations, you're not supposed to put a flapper in these new wood stoves. Okay, fine. You don't want to agree with federal regulations, fine. But when you actually start using this thing, you will realize you don't want it. This thing burns so efficiently if you put dry firewood in it that this little vent down here at the bottom is all you need. If you start regulating with this, you're going to cause a catastrophe with the reburners. And people always talk about, you want to keep the heat in. Heat doesn't care what's in its way. Heat will continue to rise up. What you're doing is you're restricting flow. Remember that airflow that sucks air into this? When you turn that flapper, you're restricting that air. You want to restrict the air before it hits those reburners. One guy was so adamant about two things. He says, I'm going to effing buy you one of these flapper valves so you won't burn down your effing house, because I want to see it effing fall down on you, not burn down on you. So he knew it was going to burn down. That was he was just so adamant it was going to burn down that he was going to buy it for me, because I built it so badly that he wanted to show me that it was going to fall down. Well, there's no sign of this thing falling down. It's handled 80-mile-an-hour winds, 70-mile-an-hour winds. Since then, I haven't had that problem because I haven't burnt wet wood. The thing is I've never seen two things. I've never seen anybody apologize about these things. And I've never seen anybody say, wow, you proved me wrong. I learned something, which is what I really want people to learn. Next thing was this porch roof. First, the two things they always kept saying, the first snow you get, it's going to collapse on you. It can't hold any weight. One of the reasons is I use screws here instead of nails. I use screws throughout the whole house. If you do the calculations, each screw can hold 90 pounds. It says it right on Google. Again, instead of listening, people will just say, well, that's not the code. And the second thing is the first wind that comes through is going to fly off. Well, still here. Like I said, we've had some huge winds. I did the calculations of all the 2x6s and the screws. If I took my truck apart and set it on top of here, of course you'd have to lay it out correctly, it can hold more than my truck weighs. So the other day I said two things. So here's a clip of the first thing I said. I do believe heat is essential. More people die from cold weather than they do hot weather. In order to survive hot weather, drink water. What Carolyn and I do, we drink a lot of water. Between the two of us, we probably drink 3 gallons every 2 days. But in the wintertime, you can get too cold where you can't keep warm. You'll start shivering and you can die. Hypothermia, especially if you get wet. Cold weather is much more risky than hot weather. So in that video you saw, I said knowledge is power. And I was talking about the firewood. You can have it for 15 years. It's not going to rot on you. And so I wanted people to realize that you can do things, but you kind of have to forget about the old things that you have learned. So in that video, I was talking about cold versus hot. And I said more people die in the cold than they do in the heat. And so here's a clip of that. But hickory and oak, it takes 2 to 3 years for it to get cured, so you can actually use it to get 20% or less moisture content. Out of the 15 years, you're already subtracting 3, so that gives you 12 years that it's got to sit there. As long as it's stacked up and the water can drain off of it, it'll last a long, long time. The only reason I bring that up is because somebody will say, it won't last that long. So knowledge is power. And the problem is a lot of people have the wrong knowledge. There I was saying that if you just drink water in the summer, you'll be fine. But in the winter, you're going to really want to take care of yourself. Make sure you have a place to heat. Well, I got a comment from somebody from North Florida, exactly where I built the camper. I was in North Florida. I know how hot it gets there. My dad knows how hot it gets there, and he lived in Missouri too. I would imagine Dad likes Florida a lot better than he likes Missouri because Missouri gets so dang cold. Now I know people from Canada can say, you don't know what cold is. Well, occasionally we do get, -4, -6 degrees. It's pretty cold. She said, I'm from North Florida, and you're wrong. Just as many people die in the heat as they do the cold. Matter of fact, I bet more people die in the heat than they do the cold. I'm looking it up now. Instead of her looking it up, I went to Google where I already had found the information, and some research center said that for every 1 death, heat-related death, there are 9 cold-related weather deaths. So 9 times the number of people die in the winter than they do in the summer. Now these people who were born and raised, like she said she was, in Florida, seem like they have the authority to say something about the heat. Well, like I said, I've been through Florida and Missouri can get just as hot as Florida. It's got just as bad humidity. I know people are from Florida and Mississippi say, oh no, that's not true. I will agree, we are not as hot as long as you are, but we can get as hot. So I know what it feels like. And we can live without air conditioning, like I said in that video. People in Florida have no idea what -4 feels like, or -6. When they're telling you that if you go outside for more than 5 or 6 minutes, you will get frostbite. Where they're telling you if you get wet, you're gonna die. It's that simple. So people who live in Florida their entire lives, they don't know what the dangers of cold weather are. So this person watched a video where I said knowledge is power, and I was trying to explain some knowledge I had learned, because our country has just went past $33 trillion in debt. We're at serious risk, and we need to start learning how to survive if things are to go bad. Well, she didn't want to learn. She didn't want to change her mind. And so when she replied back to me finally, that's not what I meant, she said. I meant that you should not have said that cold weather kills people, but hot weather doesn't. Well, you saw the video. I didn't say that. Secondly, that's not what she said. What she said was, just as many people die from heat as they do from cold. I would bet more people would die. I'm going to look it up. So instead of learning anything, what she did was she gaslighted, she lied trying to convince me that I was still wrong somehow. I remember one time I was told that the Wizard of Oz was colored with colored pencil, and I believed that from a child. And I grew up and became an adult in my 20s, and I said that to someone, and somebody just razzed me to death over that. And since then, I've really tried to take an effort to dismiss some of these wives' tales or whatever it's called, and learn everything I can. That way, when I want to build a tiny house and I've never built one before, I can actually build one. That way, I'm not trying to shove a chimney upside down, getting creosote to run down my wood stove, catch on fire and burn everything down. So if you'll click this up next box, take you to a video where I was talking about that, the national debt and all that. So I hope I can inspire you. Knowledge is power, so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.